Welcome to the O2 messaging service. The person you are calling...
Where's Bruce?
Watch this. No way!
Hello and welcome back to the Cookie Jar Golf Podcast. I am Tom Mills. Today I'm joined by Sam Williams.
Hello, Thomas.
And not Bruce Fitzpatrick.
Oh, thought it was empty on this Zoom meeting.
We're sans Bruce.
See, I have a deal. I have a deal where if I say I'm going to pod at 8, I pod at 8. I turn up. I'm a good guy like that.
I know. I mean, must be a busy bumblebee. But no matter. We've got the two of us. We've got our expanded opinions. I'm sure we could throw around rhetoric with the best.
Plus, we're going to pod about the Olympics, aren't we? So let's be really honest. And there has not been a huge amount of Olympics watched because there's been very little Olympics aired in the UK. So
yeah, but we've certainly got lots to talk about in terms of the Olympics. We've got obviously the victors and the gold, silver, and bronze, and we've got the format and all sorts of things we could talk about. Really. So first of all, let's kick it off. I mean, we managed to watch in the UK, I'd say a good few hours in the end.
Yeah, I watched a little bit on Sunday. It was a shame, wasn't it? I think, full disclosure, we got asked to do a little bit of coverage on BBC Radio, didn't we?
It was very exciting in Jar HQ
last week. So when the BBC get in touch and say, we want Britain's number one golf boutique media group to come and do some coverage on this, I was like, yeah, okay, sounds good. And then I thought about the time difference, and it was very, very clear from the conversations with the BBC that there wasn't an enormous amount of organisation or rigour around it. So I think it was working on the premise that someone might ring me over a 4-day period, and it could be anything between 2 a.m. and 8 a.m. I mean, didn't happen, but would have been nice. They
probably got wind of Bruce's tardiness and decided that it wasn't reliable enough to call, so they've decided to maybe go to the Rich Hills podcast.
That's the thing, isn't it? That is the concern. I mean, it's important you turn up for things on time, but I was well prepped. I thought the wide viewing, audience base that is BBC Radio 5 Live would have really liked to hear about Charles Allison's work in Japan. I think his collaboration with Colt. I thought the stuff around Korai, kind of that thick, wiry grass they've got in Japan, and the fact they have two greens to kind of cater for winter and summer grass. I was really looking forward to telling the nation about that, but sadly, it'll have to keep for another 4 years, by the looks of it.
And of course, the rising popularity of the game in Asia, but. Yeah, we'll have to keep for 4 years. Maybe. Well, I don't know. Maybe we'll get. There's obviously the women's is kicking off on Wednesday the 4th. So perhaps we'll get a phone call then when the women's event kick off. Well, let's start with some of the women's. I mean, I think the men's game has really got me excited. I think it got the players excited. Like there was obviously that thing 4 years ago.
You excited? Let me just push you on that. Did it get you excited?
Yeah, I enjoyed the 7-man playoff for bronze. And I thought it was interesting that everyone, I mean, you're not going to just throw in the towel and say, no, I'm not doing it and walk off. But like, there was clearly meant a lot to win a bronze. And, do any of these players ever got excited about getting a 3rd place and anything else? Don't think so.
Yeah, I think it's more that, I mean, let's just, if I can force the agenda ever so slightly here, can we just talk a little bit about the format, the event? There's a few, for me, question marks around, is it right we've got professionals in the event versus amateurs? I think that's a discussion topic. Is 4-day stroke play, like, do we not have enough 4-day stroke play events, and is there space for maybe a slightly different format? I agree with you. I think it's good. I think there's a lot of really good things to be said for golf in the Olympics, and I'm delighted it's there, because you go to Japan, it serves up the world's best players there to a different audience that wouldn't see them perhaps, or certainly, wouldn't see them that often. It's good for encouraging grassroots participation, gets a different audience engaged in the sport. I think that's all good stuff. But not sure.
Let's push back on a little bit of that. So first of all, I mean, I said I'll start with 3 different things already, but let's start with the format. I wasn't sold on stroke play. I agree we have too much stroke play. there's so much golf out there that stroke play doesn't really tickle my fancy. Being that it is an Olympics and you're representing your country, I would prefer to see a team format. I wouldn't like to see a match play, I don't think, but I wouldn't mind seeing, like a Ryder Cup style better ball. Match play. No, but like better ball, then foursome alternate day.
Kind of like the pairs thing. I've forgotten where they play. Is it where they play the pairs event each year? It's around Easter time. US, but you get it, right? It's like whether there's some sort of team-based event. Yeah. I think can definitely subscribe to that.
I think that would suit the agenda better. That you're representing your country, you're playing for it. They have enough opportunities to play for themselves. I think, granted, not all countries put in 2 players, and not all. Some countries have got 4. I think the US put in 4. Some countries have got 1, but if they could manufacture in a way that there are pairs and you could do it in a better ball / foursome, combo, I think that would be, for me, I think I'd enjoy that more. It's something a bit more novel. But then to go answer your next question, would that benefit the wider audience and people trying to get engaged in golf? And I don't know, perhaps that wouldn't tick that box.
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult one. I just think the format as it's thrown together is a little haphazard would be the best way. It's like, what works well? Well, let's speak to the PGA Tour Commission. Okay, how do you run your golf events? Well, we have a staple diet, 4 days, Thursday through to Sunday, stroke play, individual. And like, best will in the world, you're going to lean on the experts when you go to them for help, aren't you? And that's probably why we've got that. I think there's definitely space for a different format. I think that to me feels like a pretty straightforward question. I mean, I think the way the field is comprised essentially takes the world rankings, and then I think down to a certain point, countries, if they have up to 4 players within that allotted pool, they can enter 4. Otherwise, they would enter the top 2 as a pairing, and that's how they'd go about it. But you just change the rules to fit that. I think I just personally would like to see that. I'd have loved to have seen, Casey and Fleetwood kind of ham and egging it around there a bit, and sort of a bit of bromance and a bit of fun.
Yeah,
I'd love to have seen like Rory and Shane. That for me would have made the event a lot more watchable. I think watching 7 guys just parring their faces off down the 18th on repeat, like that's doing nothing for the sport to me. I think anyway. Like you've got to always put yourself in the shoes of like, when you're watching weightlifting or diving with this stuff, whatever, it just looks, how does it look to the viewing public? And so, well, I'm watching the same guys take 4 shots down the same hole on repeat. That's not ticking the latter box to me.
I think part of the reason the Ryder Cup works so much is, yes, it's team versus team, but it's that team spirit that you get that you don't ever see in golf. And I think they had an opportunity to capitalize on that and expand it. The Ryder Cup is obviously just Europe and America, and you've got the President's Cup as well. But I don't know. Like, it didn't, like you say, we're just watching a sort of a par fest down the playoff hole. They all obviously really wanted it.
Yeah, of course.
And onto your point about expanding the game, like, I'm not sure how they managed to. Okay, it's not their fault. I'm not sure how they managed to expand the game when they're not allowed any spectators on site and they're not televising the event until the last 3 holes on the last day. Perhaps there are mechanisms to watch it that we weren't aware of, but
yeah, well, I think I think that's the thing. So in the UK, when we had London 2012, I think, and 2016, the BBC essentially owned the broadcasting rights, which meant through things like Red Button, you could just hop between all the different sports. So they'd built this kind of nice plethora, click on the red button and you can watch everything from tiddlywinks to golf and everything in between. Whereas now, because everything's dependent on like streaming services, what they've got is a situation where all the individual sporting distribution rights have already been packaged up and sold off. So maybe that's a bit of a shame because, again, this isn't a sports podcast. This is a golf podcast, but it is nice when you're watching the Olympics to move to something that's like topical and going on. So, I mean, another kind of, penny for your thoughts here, Tom, but we ran a little bit of a poll across Twitter, Instagram, amazingly well received, high levels of engagement.
As always with the
servers at Instagram were broken. Should the Olympics, particularly golf, be professional or amateurs? And I've kind of done a little bit of light reading around this. I'd be interested to get your take.
Okay, I'll put it back on you. Are you asking about golf or just the Olympics in general?
Oh, no, about golf.
Okay. Would you rather not see Andy Murray or Roger Federer or Nadal play tennis in the Olympics?
And I think that's a really good counter argument. So I wonder if maybe it's as
someone for me who doesn't watch tennis.
Yeah,
I'm not really. I would watch Federer and Nadal. So in that respect, it's a pull because I'll watch it because it's the Olympics and I'll watch it because they're the best players in the world. So if I reverse that and I want someone to be engaged in golf, you want the best players in the world on display. That's my thought on it.
And I think that's where I've got to after a few days of navel gazing on this one.
Because, how does one navel gaze?
Well, you're just staring at your stomach thinking, aren't you, really? That is, yeah, and occasionally looking at the ceiling. That is navel gazing in its purest form. That's pretty much where I got to. I wonder if maybe, look, we're right on the edge here of being out and out obsessed with the game. And, we really like seeing stuff that's a bit different because we get a good dollop of PGA Tour golf and major championships. But yeah, I kind of think, do you know what? I'm not really into my tennis. I'll watch Wimbledon. If the tennis was on and it didn't have the Federers, the Murrays, the Nadals playing, I'm not sure it would float my boat. So I think that's a really good counter argument. Amazingly, and maybe a strong indication of, kind of people's passion to see more amateur golf, I think, more than anything. But there was a fairly strong majority that wanted to see amateurs. And there's a lot of votes in that poll, like jokes aside.
I can 100% agree with it in terms of in a purist golf format, these players get paid plenty of money. They get opportunities to do plenty of things. It's not the pinnacle of their sport. As much as, whichever way you want.
Whereas 100-meter sprinter, that is it. That's the pinnacle.
So I can completely see the argument for get the amateurs in there, make it the pinnacle of amateur golf. That you win the US Am, you win the amateur in the UK, and you win the Olympics, and that's like the pinnacle of amateur golf. I get it. Like, I think that as a golfing purist, but from a commercial entity and in a grow the game format, I think
you've got to be realistic, and that's where I kind of came to it. I think it's quite interesting because I think maybe I've been carrying around the soundtrack for a while about this, but the Olympics is essentially amateur sportsmen, and the reality is they're not. Like for the last 40 or 50 years, since we've had Coca-Cola and McDonald's or whoever else kind of get using that as a kind of commercial platform, these are paid athletes. I think
I can't say Usain Bolt was doing it for a laugh.
Yeah, exactly. Was it, Richard Branson's kind of throwing money at him left, right, and centre, wasn't it? But you've got the only sports I think where that doesn't exist is wrestling and boxing.
But there's a very big distinction, isn't it? Which I like. There's but it's think about boxing, for instance. It is essentially a different sport. They've got different protection. They bout for different lengths with different number of rounds. It's a dialed back version of the professional sport. And once you turn pro, you understand you cannot participate in the Olympics. That's fine. They sign up to that. You know what I mean?
It'd be a bloodbath, wouldn't it? You start putting people like Joshua in the ring against, I don't know, Gibraltar's number one heavyweight. It's a bloodbath there, isn't it?
It's like Eurovision. You don't want to see pros in Eurovision, do you? It's just carnage.
So I think that's kind of set the world straight in terms of the format for me and the players. I think that was quite key. I want to know, final question I got for you on this, Tom. I want your take. Did the Australian 2020 cricket kit work for you on the golf course? Cameron Smith, Mark Leishman.
It was a strong look. I think
there was a lot of strong looks, in fairness. I thought the GB stuff was pretty horrendous as well.
And Rory, I think it was Adidas stash or something. It looked like he pulled a polo from from Sports Direct. Like,
But it was tonal, wasn't it? It was nice
it
and
was
tonal.
just
It was
like-
nice and tonal. It was the olive
you
green.
can
It was
imagine
okay.
these athletes that are earning huge sums of money, but like getting up to the village, like, fucking yeah, just got my jet to bring me here. Right, where's my stash? Here it is, boys. Just got it. Bulk order. JD Sports. This is when we're good.
I mean, Fleetwood looked like a Spanish exchange student for the whole week. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. It's the most outrageous. I mean, that polo shirt Paul Casey was wearing was absolutely appalling. But there is no doubt that the Australian look
they took
was.
this shit.
You know how we still look at pictures of like Daly and stuff when he's on the course, or Tom Kite? I think Cameron Smith in 40 years' time is going to have GOAT status on social media state. When you look at the mullet, the tour visor, coupled in with a high-vis polo shirt and green slacks, it takes some beating.
Well, you got to realise in this world, if you stand still for long enough, you will eventually be ahead of the curve. And Cam Smith is... Someone's going to come around in like 10, 15 years' time. Like, mullets will be back in. Like, these big tats will be back in. And they like look at Cam Smith going like, oh my God, that guy was so ahead of his time. It is unreal. But it's such a strong look. It was... I'd say I'd pull it off, but very, very strong.
Couple of other little sub-stories then. So... I don't know, maybe I was the only one that was really pulling for Siwoo Kim and Sung Jae-im out there this week.
Yeah, it was. There's quite a lot going on, wasn't it? And Hideki, of course.
Hideki doesn't have to do military, to be fair, mate. Hideki's Japanese.
Why were you pulling for those guys so much?
Right. So Siwoo Kim and Sung Jae-im are, South Korean. Part of the rules there is, you have to do, I think, 18 months military service between, I want to say the ages something like 21 and 26. That is absolutely non-negotiable, and the only exemption from that is winning the Olympics.
Oh, is that right?
It's the only way you can actually kind of get out of that, if you will. Which is why they withdrew from the Open Championship. When we talked about it in the pod, and I was kind of tearing apart people like Sung Jae for not playing, I knew that I didn't make it explicitly clear. I didn't realize that. I thought it was quite well known, but yeah, like they've clearly prioritized it now. Imagine being in...
Is it a medal or just a gold?
It's any medal. So, gold, silver or bronze. You've just got to win an Olympic medal.
That's some pressure, isn't it?
You've got to think, 18 months, particularly in the world of a professional golfer, form is everything. You're dealing in 0.1 scoring average is the difference between world top 20 and world top 200. And it falls off rapidly from there. And you think having 18 months off the game would be a chronic injury to have 18 months away. 3 to 6 months is big in the sport. So, you've got to feel for what the guys are facing into there. And obviously be great to see Tommy Fleetwood or Paul Casey having won it. Everyone would have loved to see Rory do great, just like they always do. But it would have been amazing to have seen one of those guys win a medal and out competing on the PGA Tour as a result, because they are really some of the world's best golfers. They're insanely talented. And I think it really is such a shame, because that feels like, I hope we haven't got any kind of listeners in South Korea that high up in government, but it does feel terribly bureaucratic, which I think is a shame for what is an incredibly developed country, really.
Yeah, but it's part of the culture, isn't it? Like, who are we to judge on what goes on? It is to us, it seems like a huge shame. I'm sure those guys don't particularly want to be going to do it, to be fair.
And Hideki, right? Another great story there. That would have really capped off a brilliant year. Masters, Olympic gold in his home country. There'd be so much going for that. But
it was interesting. Another interesting subplot, of course, is Sabatini.
Well, I haven't really. Obviously, I know that there's. I know that he's Slovakian.
Well, he's South African. So,
but Slovakian nationality.
But changed now. The initial thing coming out of the Sabatini camp was he's married into it. He's got a Slovakian wife, and he wanted to compete in the Olympics, which is why he changed nationalities. Now he subsequently went and changed that.
Was that why? I didn't know that's why he changed.
Yeah, because he wasn't
literally got him status to play the Olympics.
He wasn't going to get into South African team, and he wanted to play.
When did he?
That was originally.
When did he change nationality?
About a couple of years back.
Yeah.
But
It's been for a long time. He's been Slovakian.
yeah, but he then came out and changed the party line, essentially saying that he wanted to represent Slovakia because he wanted to grow participation in the game and represent the country of his wife's origin. Now, whichever way you roll the dice and whichever face you land on, he wouldn't have been in the Olympics. Now he is in the Olympics, and he's come away with a silver medal. So fair play.
Yeah, that is pretty special, isn't it? I actually didn't know that was the reason behind it.
That's the original story that came out a few years back. But yeah, I was like I said, he went back and sort of rewrote it slightly. I think because if you talk about, I've changed nationality because I want to be in the Olympics, and I'm not going to do it for my own country. Down the best line in the world. But either way, however you dice it up, that's pretty awesome that he managed to get out there, represent, because he would not have been in the Olympics with Zayden Hout and who else was representing South Africa? And Garrett Higo. But you've got quite a few above Sabatini in sort of the South African rankings. So, I mean, that was awesome. I was really pulling for him coming down the last, but Xander just did not look like he was going to let go of that.
But he had a little jitter and he was out in the. It looked pretty tough, to be fair. The course, if you were in the cabbage, you were properly in the cabbage. Like this, it could have really disappeared quickly when he was out in the trees on the right, but he managed to kind of get himself out there, got himself in the hole, and he was back on, wasn't he? Yeah, and what was your take on a 7-way playoff? I know we touched on it briefly, but you say you were really dialed in on that. I must admit, I watched the whole of it, and then I was like, I'm checked out of this. I'm not watching this statistically, unless a load of them, unless one of them makes birdies, it's going to go on for a while.
Yeah, but there's 7 professional golfers, mate. Like, you expect someone to make a birdie. As it happens, they all went fucking birdie mental on the 3rd playoff hole. Or they didn't go because only 2 of them birdied it, but literally they all stuffed it in there, and 2 of them missed shortish ones for birdie, and 2 of them rolled them in. But it was. Perhaps you're correct. Perhaps it wasn't edge of your seat stuff, but I couldn't turn it off. I was like dialed up at that point. I was like, I need to find out what happens here. And did you watch the last playoff hole? Have you seen it?
I didn't. I know Morikawa absolutely flagged it, and there were a few kind of around the hole, weren't they?
That was the 3rd playoff hole. Morikawa flagged it. So did CT Pan. Then on the 4th playoff hole, they're back on 18. And Morikawa hits this iron in that is the biggest Andy Johnson fried egg you have ever seen. Like, he's missed clubs.
That's not going in the pod. We are not endorsing another podcast on this podcast.
Oh, don't worry, that's fine. The biggest fried egg you've ever seen, and it's like, for everything, it's just death. Like, it was impossible from where he was. So, CT Pan gets green side ups and downs to a par. Game over. But good to see Rory up there competing. Hideki up there as well.
It was a nice change of pace, wasn't it? Just a shame there wasn't much of it on. But I think it's an interesting topic of discussion nonetheless. And
of course we got the women's event starting on Wednesday, and there's some serious names in there. We got Minjee Lee, Brooke Henderson, Sophia Popov, Mel Reid, and Jodie Hewitt-Sadoff representing the UK. Maria Farsi, Anne Van Dam, who's possibly my favourite golf name in the history of the world. Lydia Ko, both Corder sisters, Danielle Kang, Lexi Thompson. Serious.
It's still the same track, isn't it? Kasamigaseki. It's still the same place.
And I'm amazed you can pronounce it.
Yeah, I know, but that's what happens when you're asked to go on to national radio, mate, to be a sports pundit. You kind of have to know this stuff. I even
Japanese
elocution lessons. Yeah, I was fully versed in it. I'm kind of with you. I actually think the women's will possibly be a little bit more entertaining. I don't know why. I just feel like it's got 2 chances, hasn't it? And I didn't think the men's was all that entertaining, really. Hence why there wasn't much coverage of it. But yeah, I think that's cool as well. And it'll also be nice to see them playing the same course. It'll be nice to see them.
I think the coverage thing, just to go on to you talking about the coverage, it's not that it's not entertaining, but I think for a mass audience, it's hard to explain why something's important on day 2 of a 4-day event. I think that's the
I think
problem.
it's difficult to explain to a golfing audience why some things, even in a major championship,
Yeah.
I find Friday is a genuine slog of a major, don't you? So I can get psyched about the opening night of the Masters. I can probably watch the first day of most tournaments. I find Friday is a bit of a chore.
Do you think?
Saturday, yeah, the second half of Saturday.
It's an arm
moving
wrestle,
day,
isn't
isn't
it?
it? Yeah,
just an arm
whereas
wrestle.
Saturday's moving day and Sunday's the final round. So Friday is, and that's exactly why four-day stroke play is just not the ticket. It's too drawn out for what is quite a fast-paced kind of few weeks. You've got so many things. Like those 4 days, like they did the taekwondo and the whole of the judo stuff in like 2 days, didn't they? And there's a lot happening there. So I don't follow it, but there's stuff to talk about. You're not kind of engrossed in, kind of small kind of attritional battles with the course for 4 days. And I think, look, I really hope golf stays in the Olympics. I think it'd be really, really sad times if that didn't. And I have no question that it'll stay in for the duration.
Yeah, I hope so.
Well, you'd be daft not to. And you've got to think like, they are top, they're household name sportsmen, that such is the stature of the game. But I would like to see a different format. I'd like to see a team-based thing. I'd like to see something played over 36 holes. And I'd like to see a bit more spice in there. I think you can get all that stuff happening. Final question. Rory playing for Ireland. I thought that was...
I think it brought less of a fanfare than people were expecting, possibly because he announced it so long ago.
Yeah.
Like after the last Olympics, he was like, yeah, I didn't, but it would have been for Ireland. And I think in retrospect, having read a little about it, like he's always represented, this is from my very poor understanding of, there's the Irish Golfing Union, who he's always represented, which all players in the island of Ireland represent.
Yeah.
Which covers the whole of Ireland. So it's not like he's made a distinctly political decision. That's kind of what he's always represented, is the island of
exactly.
Ireland.
And the fact that it wasn't a deal was the kind of ideal outcome, in as much as, like you say, it was announced so long ago that, and I think if you understand the nuances of golf in Ireland and, particularly junior golf in Ireland, you understand that's not really an issue at all. Just moving us on slightly from the Olympics. We've obviously just released our Prestwick film. Struck me the other day that we did North Berwick and then rolled into our first ever course diaries. I'd be interested to hear how you thought that went. At Painswick. And then I woke up the next morning, I was like, and now I've got to write a lot about Prestwick. So
don't be
for
confused.
people who just feel like this is all blending into a blur.
Yeah. One's a David Brown Nightmare in the Hills, which is the hardest golf course in the world. The other one
like
is
a Stanley Kubrick novel, isn't it? It's really
one's
that thing's
an
in
old,
my nightmares.
One's an old Tom Morris masterpiece up in the west coast of Scotland, but very similar names, distinctly different golf courses. We won't go into the full details of Prestwick, but fair to say.
No, but I'm curious to get your thoughts on it, because I think, we're on a slightly different podcast here. The idea behind Course Diaries is obviously that we have these short sort of, I think micropods is probably sexing it up a little bit, essentially short discussions about the course. But I think it's quite cool. I quite enjoyed doing that one last week, actually.
We'll give a few more a go. I mean, it's been fairly positive response, but I think the fact that we're now talking about golf courses kind of negates the point of doing, which I'm still calling the cookie crumbs, but you're not having any of it.
I'm not having it. It's not the cookie crumbs. So Course Diaries, the cookie crumbs can be a feature in the newsletter, and you can have that for, whatever you want. You talked about fried egg earlier, they're quick hooks, I think. You can have it for that. So anyway, that's the closest we're getting to a plug for another pod on this pod.
Well, it's a classic podcast. Okay, guys.
It's ridiculous. And I was really hoping Bruce walked into this meeting halfway through and we could tear him to shreds. But he's 52 minutes late for the podcast. I think it's safe to say he's not coming on this podcast.
I don't think so. I'll be surprised if he turns up now. Perhaps we'll get a phone call in 10 minutes and say, where are you boys? I'm hanging about here. And we'll find out.
Don't think that he's putting pen to paper on a journalism deal with BBC Sport, do you? He wouldn't have stitched us up like that, would he? You don't think he's in sort of late talks with Ian Carter about possibly becoming the BBC golf correspondent.
The late night answer to Tony Livesey.
No.
I don't think so. No, I hope not. Anyway, thank you for putting up with the two of us gabbling on about absolute nonsense. If you haven't checked out our Prestwick film, please do. And we will be releasing another Course Diaries podcast at the later part of this week. But if you have any comments, as always, please do get in touch with us on @CookieJarGolf. And until then, we will speak to you next time.
Adios.
Watch this.